While I was preparing the dinner to celebrate our 5th wedding anniversary, my best friend called with an urgent voice. "Jessica, you need to come to the Prudential Tower right now. Your husband is with a French woman, and they're being intimate." When I got there, I was stunned to see my husband down on one knee, kissing the 8-month pregnant belly of the foreign woman. But instead of making a scene, I quietly walked away and hosted the promotion party for my husband, then said one sentence that left both him and his mistress trembling, unable to stand. "My name is Jessica. I'm 35 years old and 7 months pregnant." That afternoon, Chicago was draped in a thin veil of mist, cold as a chiffon shroud. I stood in the middle of our penthouse, looking down at the river turning a deep indigo, cutting white roses in preparation for our 5th wedding anniversary dinner. Jameson, my husband, had messaged to say he had an emergency meeting and would be late, a phrase that had become a routine over the past months. As I turned, the scissors slipped from my hand, clattering onto the marble floor with a sharp, cold sound that made my heart tighten for a brief moment, a faint, unplaceable foreboding. Just then, Lucy, my best friend, called, her voice battling the wind from Beacon Rooftop. "Jessica, you need to come now. I'm at the Prudential Tower, 50th floor. Jameson's here with a French woman, and they're very close." I didn't have time to think, only enough to grab my belly and run for the door in a haze of panic, call an Uber, and nearly suffocate through the entire ride to the tower. When the elevator doors opened on the 50th floor, Lucy yanked me into a shadowed corner. Right in front of me, Jameson was sitting close beside Victoria Alcott, the French CEO the Chicago financial world always spoke of with admiration. They were holding hands like longtime lovers. When Victoria stood up, her 8-month pregnancy was clearly visible under a white silk dress. Jameson immediately stood as well, placed a hand gently on her belly, and bent to kiss her forehead, with a tenderness I hadn't seen directed at me in a very long time. Victoria gave a soft smile to the waiter and said, "We'll have our son in Paris." I turned and rushed into the elevator, clutching my belly as if to shield the baby inside from this blow. Back home, I just stood in the dark kitchen, staring at the anniversary dinner I'd spent 3 hours preparing, then silently emptied it all into the trash. No tears, no words, only the growing void in my chest, cold and vast. As if drawn by an invisible force, I walked straight to Jameson's safe and opened it. Inside lay a leather-bound dark brown iPad Pro, so glossy it reflected my pale face. I turned it on. My hands were shaking so hard I had to steady myself for a few seconds before typing the first passcode. 03/04, Jameson's birthday. Incorrect passcode. I swallowed the lump in my throat and typed 11/20, our wedding anniversary. Wrong again. I let out a bitter laugh. How absurd to think that a man blatantly cheating would use his wedding date as a password. I took a deep breath and typed June 14th, Jameson's mother's birthday, the one he'd always used for everything since the days we had nothing. The screen lit up immediately. Gmail launched automatically. In the important folder, a dense list of PDF files appeared, some over 40 pages long, each titled with words like agreement, contract, statement. I tapped on the first one. A half-page of text loaded, beginning with, "Agreement to purchase." I didn't get to scroll down to read the rest, because just then, the baby kicked hard, as if in warning. I cradled my stomach, my head spinning, and felt with eerie certainty that something massive and dangerous was waiting beneath those pages, something that could reduce my entire life to ashes. I set the iPad down on the table, my palms slick with sweat, and I knew, whatever I was about to read, would change everything. And I could feel it so clearly my hand was still trembling when I touched the iPad screen again. The contract page appeared, this time in full, no longer obscured by the panic of earlier. The first line froze my breath. Agreement to purchase. Villa Lumière, Côte d'Azur. I zoomed in on the number below. $25 million. $25 million for an entirely different life, a life I had never even stepped foot in. I scrolled down and read each line carefully, as if trying to decode the language of a world that didn't belong to me. The ownership structure section nearly made me drop the iPad. Joint tenancy, Jameson Hale, and Victoria Alcott. Joint tenancy, a co-ownership status used only for married couples, or those committed to building a life together. It meant they weren't just buying a house together. They intended to live together, live long-term, live as a family. I kept scrolling, and 3D renderings of the villa appeared. A living room facing the sea with travertine stone floors, an infinity pool blending into the horizon, a staircase leading up to a rooftop terrace where two sun loungers sat side by side. All images of the perfect married life I had once dreamed of, now meant for another woman. My heart pounded so hard, I thought I could hear it echo in the hollow penthouse. The baby nudged softly inside me, as if seeking safety in a world I no longer recognized. I read on to the contract's date of signing, and a detail made my whole body go cold. They had signed it during the same week Jameson claimed he was in Paris for a business trip. So while I was here alone, carefully preparing the nursery, he was standing beside her, hand on her belly, signing their future. Beneath Jameson's signature was Victoria Alcott's, soft and slanted. Just those two pen strokes were enough to make me feel the truth. I wasn't just betrayed. I had been replaced long ago without ever knowing. I set the iPad down on the table, breathing heavily, and in that moment I understood. The $25 million villa was just the tip of the iceberg. If they'd bought a house together, what else had been hidden? What accounts? What companies? Or an entire parallel life I had never seen? Something in me collapsed, and something else awakened. And I knew, tonight was only the beginning. And in the dense silence of the penthouse, I pulled the iPad closer and opened the supporting documents tab of the contract, like someone tracing the footprints of betrayal. At the bottom of the folder, I found a faint scan, but it was legible, an ultrasound appointment at Clinique des Lumières, Paris. My heart jolted, my chest clenched as if squeezed tight. I dialed the number on the document, not thinking about what I was doing, only knowing I needed to hear the truth from someone who had no reason to lie to me. The long, cold rings echoed, the sound unmistakably European, clinical. Then a gentle French woman's voice came through in English. Clinique des Lumières, how may I assist you? I swallowed hard and tried to steady my voice. I'm calling to confirm an appointment for Jameson Hale. The nurse seemed to pull up the records immediately. Her voice turned warm, casual, like she was speaking to an insurance colleague. Ah, yes. He came in with his girlfriend a few weeks ago. Third ultrasound, if I recall correctly. My hand went numb, as if it no longer belonged to me. I pressed on, trying to keep my breath steady. Girlfriend? The nurse chuckled, light-hearted, unaware that every word was crashing into my life like falling stones. Yes, the young woman is about 7 or 8 months pregnant. Last time, he was holding her belly during the scan. Very sweet. They looked like such a happy couple. I heard something crack inside my head, like the final thread had snapped. My lips pressed tight, but the numbness kept spreading across my skin. The nurse went on, still in her professional tone. Are you calling about insurance processing or to transfer the medical records to the U.S.? I didn't answer. I could only hear the blood pounding in my ears, every beat like a hammer blow. In Paris, Victoria was the beloved girlfriend. In Chicago, I was the legal wife, carrying the child he had abandoned. Two parallel worlds, with one man standing between them, but only one world was chosen to hold his future. And I knew that call had opened the first door into a truth darker than anything I had imagined. But it wasn't the whole of it. I returned to the iPad screen, my hands so cold I had to rub them together before I could keep scrolling. In the Financials folder, a link led straight to Jameson's Dropbox, and I opened it with the sense of stepping into a dense forest filled with traps. A string of folders appeared. Aquila Partners, Blue Shoreline, Helios Consulting, Novosphere AG. Each name clean, professional. But the more I opened, the more I noticed a pattern. All were registered in Seychelles or Liechtenstein, infamous tax havens in the finance world. I opened Aquila Partners, Ledger.xlsx, and nearly stopped breathing at the list of transactions. Crypto funds pouring into 14 different wallets, split up, then reassembled into a single wallet before landing in Jameson Hale's personal account. Each arrow on the money flow chart felt like a blade slicing away the mask of the man I had called husband for 5 years. I scrolled to the bottom. The total made my bones freeze. 42,318,000 USD. Money that had vanished in 18 months. I moved on to the second folder, then the third, then the fourth. And every transaction carried one recurring name in the authorized signature field. Olivier Alcott, Victoria's younger brother. A man the European press called a tech genius, but now in my eyes was nothing more than a link in the money laundering chain Jameson was entangled in. I remembered all the nights Jameson came home late, saying he was meeting investors, or the times he boasted about receiving secret bonuses, like the $8 million one, from some successful deal. I had believed him, congratulated him, even cooked lavish dinners to celebrate. Now I understood the truth, that money wasn't reward, wasn't earned. It was dirty money, a cut from a scheme he had hidden behind his fake tenderness toward me. When I opened a final PDF titled Skyline Coin Restructuring, the last puzzle pieces clicked into place like a bomb going off in my head. Skyline Coin, a crypto project once suspected of fraud but never proven, was in fact the pipeline for laundering. Jameson hadn't just cheated. He had betrayed me, betrayed our child, and betrayed thousands of investors who trusted his fund. I set the iPad down, my stomach twisting, not from the baby, but from the realization that the life I was standing on was actually thin ice, already starting to crack beneath my feet. And now I knew I was no longer merely the victim of an affair. I was the only person who had seen the full truth that an entire financial system was trying to bury. That thought left my throat dry, but I pulled the iPad closer and opened Jameson's Gmail drafts folder, the kind of place people often forget to clear, assuming it holds nothing dangerous. When the list of drafts appeared, I noticed something strange. Emails Jameson had never sent, yet written with such detail that revealed his true intent. I opened the first one, and the opening line knocked the air from my lungs. Mark, prepare the divorce papers. I'll move to France before the baby is born. The date of that draft was the same week I first felt the baby kick hard. The week I bought the wooden crib Jameson had said he really liked. I scrolled down, reading each word like swallowing a blade. Jameson had told his lawyer I was too sensitive, too unpredictable, not the kind of woman fit to raise a child. My phone nearly slipped from my hand as I opened the second draft, a short line, but sharp enough to pierce the softest part of me. Jessica is not stable enough to be a mother. I hadn't misread it. I read it 3 times. And each time, the words carved deeper, as if Jameson were standing right in front of me, coldly declaring that the child I was carrying day by day would be better off without me. I placed my hand over my belly, feeling the baby's small kicks. As if the child were holding on to me, begging me not to collapse. Through my tears, I whispered, "Mommy's okay. I'm here." But even I didn't believe my own voice. In that moment, I understood something profound. Jameson hadn't just betrayed our marriage, my body, my heart. He had betrayed my very right to be a mother, and that betrayal cut deeper than anything he'd ever done. But through the searing pain in my chest, another thought began to rise. Sharp, clear, and so cold I barely recognized it as my own. I looked around the penthouse, once my home, now just the stage where he performed the role of perfect husband. And I understood that if I stayed silent, I would be swallowed whole by his cruelty. I couldn't let that happen, not for me, but for the child inside me. The next morning, As the first light filtered through the white curtains, I sat on the bed, hand on my belly, and took a deep breath before calling Jameson. My voice rang out into the still room, so sweet it made even me shiver. Honey, I was thinking, this weekend we should throw a huge party to celebrate your promotion to global CFO. I'll invite Anthony and the entire executive team, and if you'd like, you can invite Victoria too. I heard the strange silence on the other end, a silence thick with panic he was trying hard to suppress. Jameson cleared his throat, fumbling. Victoria? Are you sure? I mean, you want everyone to be there? I gave a soft laugh, the kind of laugh that would have chilled him if he could see it in person. Of course, your success deserves to be shared with everyone. I could picture his face then, trying to stay composed, but the twitch at the corner of his eye, the tightening throat, he knew he couldn't say no. He stammered, sure, if that's what you want. That alone told me the first strike had landed. I ended the call with a gentle line. I love you. But as my finger left the screen, tears fell down my face. Not because I still loved him, but because I never imagined I'd have to use my own tenderness to expose the man who once swore to protect me. I wiped the tears away, wrapped both hands around my belly, and whispered, It's time. And in that moment, I knew I was no longer the betrayed wife. I had become the one preparing to expose the truth. Right after the call with Jameson, I opened my laptop and searched for a name an old friend from banking once mentioned. Owen Marks, a financial investigator specializing in crypto laundering, someone who could see the trails that traditional banking systems tried to obscure. I sent a short email with a few photos and transaction files, not expecting much, but 12 minutes later, Owen called back. His voice was low, firm, and direct. I've seen enough. Your husband's involved in something big. If you're serious about going all the way, we start now. I agreed without hesitation. That afternoon, Owen showed up at my penthouse. A tall, lean man, with eyes so sharp it felt like he was used to peeling back the layers of the financial world. He opened his laptop, connected a specialized USB, and began downloading the evidence I'd found on the iPad. When he saw the documents about 9 companies registered in Seychelles and Liechtenstein, Owen just shook his head. This isn't some CFO's side hustle. This is organized. Then he pulled a silver-gray business card from his pocket. Just 2 letters on it, IC. He explained it belonged to an undercover Interpol agent investigating crypto transactions across Europe and the US. I'll send your file to him, but be ready. Once Interpol's involved, there's no turning back. I nodded. I had lost too much to fear anymore. 3 hours later, Interpol replied. We launched an encrypted call, and a deep French voice came through. Jessica, we've been tracking Olivier Alcott for months, but we're missing the link. You are that link. I could hear both empathy and disbelief in Leshtishorzh's tone. Together, we reviewed photos from Beacon Rooftop, mapped Jameson and Victoria's positions, cross-referenced transaction timestamps with Jameson's so-called Paris business trips. Owen opened one last file he hadn't checked yet, an internal email between Olivier and the Skyline Coin Advisory Board. When the line appeared, a chill ran down my spine. Phase 3. Convert assets through Hail. U.S. jurisdiction is weakest link. Hail. They called Jameson the weakest link in the system. He wasn't the mastermind. He was the fall guy. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number flashed across the screen. If you're Jessica Hale, you need to see this. A second message followed with a photo. A black USB stick lying right outside my front door. I placed a hand over my belly, walked slowly to the door, and when I opened it, just like in the photo, the USB was there on the doormat, cold as the metal of a gun hiding in the dark. I handed it to Owen, who was still scanning files on his laptop. He plugged it in, and instantly a folder opened, each file marked with exact timestamps, dates, and locations of transactions, detailed beyond fabrication. Every single transfer matched precisely with the emails Jameson had sent to Victoria. When the final file opened, I glanced at the clock. 11:42 p.m. The house was hauntingly quiet. Jameson still hadn't come home, probably off at another midnight European market call, the excuse he always used when he vanished. The baby kicked hard, each jolt like a command to stay strong, as if saying, "Mom, don't stop now." Owen looked at me, then at my belly, his voice low but steady. "You're not just saving yourself, you're saving your child from a life built on lies." And I knew he wasn't exaggerating. 2 days later, when that pivotal evening arrived, I stood in the center of my own penthouse and felt as though I were in someone else's home. The warm golden lights reflected off the floor-to-ceiling glass walls, casting the silhouettes of successful businessmen and women gliding past with champagne flutes and polished smiles made for the glittering world of finance. They didn't know, or perhaps didn't want to know, that what they were toasting tonight wasn't just Jameson's promotion to global CFO, but a man teetering on the edge of an international scandal. Anthony Harrington, the fund's chairman, a silver-haired gentleman in a sleek black tuxedo, stepped onto a small platform and raised his glass. "Let us toast to Jameson Hale, the man who made Skyline Capital the brightest star of the crypto market." Applause rang out, sharp and full of blind trust. I stood in the back, hand gently resting on my belly to soothe my child, and I saw Jameson at the room's center, beaming wide, shoulders raised as if the very concept of guilt were foreign to him. Then the elevator doors opened. The sound of high heels clicked softly on marble, and every head turned toward the entrance. Victoria stepped out in a pristine white silk dress, her 8-month belly perfectly round beneath the fabric. The room seemed to stretch with tension. A few women raised their hands to their mouths. Some men raised their brows at her confident beauty. Jameson froze for a split second upon seeing Victoria. Just a moment, but enough for me to catch the panic he tried to bury beneath his thin smile. He didn't walk over to take her hand. He wasn't that foolish. Instead, he gave a polite nod, keeping a deliberately professional distance as if welcoming an important business partner from Paris. But I saw the way his hand clenched his glass, a sign that his nerves were locked tight. Victoria, on the other hand, placed one hand on her belly and smiled graciously at the guest's congratulations, her eyes glowing with the pride only a woman secure in her place in a man's life could carry. She didn't touch him, but her eyes lingered on Jameson just a little too long, a reminder that the child in her womb was the living presence of the life they had planned. I watched them like two strangers from a world I was never invited into. I had shared 5 years of my life with Jameson, held his hand when I found out I was pregnant, believed he belonged to this family. But in that moment, I understood more clearly than ever. I had loved a man I never truly knew, and that understanding made my calm so eerie it scared even me. I tightened my grip around my glass of water, stood still under the shimmering golden light, and waited for the perfect moment to drop the bomb no one in that room was prepared to catch. Just as Anthony concluded his congratulatory speech, and the last claps still echoed faintly in the air, I placed my glass on the table and stepped into the center of the room. All sounds seemed to pull back for a beat as I spoke, my voice so soft that a few people turned just to make sure they heard me right. "I have a little gift for my husband." A few eyes turned toward me, puzzled, curious, no one knowing what was about to unfold. Jameson's brow furrowed slightly, but he forced a courteous smile, as if what I'd said was nothing more than a sweet joke at a celebratory party. I pressed the button on a hidden remote in my hand. In a flash, all the room's lighting seemed to bend toward the large wall where a 100-inch screen lit up. And then, the first image appeared. Jameson and Victoria at Beacon Rooftop. He was leaning in to kiss her, hand placed tenderly on her 8-month belly, a gesture so intimate that even a stranger could see it wasn't business partners. Gasps rippled through the room. I saw Victoria jerk her hand up instinctively to shield her belly, as if the image had ripped away her carefully crafted mask. Her face went pale, even the high-end makeup unable to mask the panic in her eyes. Guests began whispering, sharp, slicing murmurs like knives. "Oh my God, she's really pregnant. That's his wife? A CFO, seriously?" Some men subtly stepped back, as if afraid to be caught in a scandal. Some women covered their mouths, while Anthony stood frozen, champagne glass tilting in his hand. Jameson was different. He broke from his artificial pride and stepped forward, his voice rough. "Jessica, what are you doing?" But he already knew the answer better than anyone in that room, and I simply looked at him, calm, as though I'd been preparing for this moment my entire life. In that moment, I could feel the heartbeat inside my belly sync with the truth I had just revealed. But that was only the thinnest layer. As Jameson stammered, desperately trying to salvage his image beneath a sea of shocked stares, I pressed the second button on the remote. The screen flickered to black for a half-second, then burst into light again. This time, it wasn't rooftop betrayal in grainy images. It was a massive chart in red, veins of arrows connecting names like cracks on ice about to shatter. 9 shell companies appeared. Aquila Partners, Helios Consulting, Novosphere AG, Blue Shoreline Holdings, each name glowing like a charge sheet. The $42 million in crypto flowing through 14 wallets before looping back to Jameson's personal account was displayed in full, a toxic bloodstream coursing through the body of an underground financial network. The whispers stopped cold. No one spoke about affairs now. They spoke of financial crime, the kind that could sink an investment fund in a single night. I let them see every arrow, every figure, every date. When Anthony Harrington's gaze shifted from shock to fury, I knew the hit had landed, but I wasn't done. I opened a second email. The system's voice read aloud to the deathly silent room. "When the baby is born, we'll live in France. The American wife is just a temporary tool." Each word landed like a hammer. Victoria, standing by the window, gripped the glass railing so hard her knuckles turned bone white. She tried to speak, but no sound came. Jameson froze, eyes wide, panic overtaking his entire body, as if his soul had been ripped bare along with his secrets. No one moved, no chair scraped, no champagne was poured. The entire room had frozen, like witnesses to a crash unfolding in slow motion. The same people who toasted him 20 minutes ago now stared at Jameson like he was a stranger, or worse, a criminal standing in the middle of a shareholder meeting. I didn't shake. I didn't scream. I simply stood there, hand on my belly, calmly unveiling the truth I had fought so hard to expose. And in that moment, I understood that what they were seeing was only part 2. The cruelest part was still waiting in the minutes to come. I took one more step. No microphone, no raised voice, just enough for everyone to see the stillness in me. Jameson tried to move toward me, stammering, "Jessica, you misunderstood. Let me explain." But I raised my hand, a gesture as light as air, but powerful enough to silence the entire room. I looked directly at him, then at the pale faces around me, frozen in horror. And with a soft voice, sharp as a blade, I said, "All files have been sent to the SEC, FBI, AMF, and the 5 largest financial newspapers in the world, 15 minutes ago." That sentence fell into the ballroom like a muted explosion. No one breathed. No one asked. Everything happened in a flash. 2 of the fund's security guards, previously stationed just to manage guest flow, immediately moved toward Jameson. He staggered back, face white as chalk. "Wait, I have rights. This is my home." But they didn't care. They seized his arms, dragging him through rows of guests who now looked at him with a mix of disgust, fear, and betrayal. The man who had entered with such arrogance was now being hauled away like a low-rate fraud. Jameson turned to find me, his voice breaking. "Jessica!" But I didn't move. Across the room, Victoria was already shaking, clutching her belly so hard her knuckles had gone waxy white. She grabbed her phone, frantically calling a car, an assistant, anyone who could pull her from a storm she never expected Jessica Hale to unleash. She almost ran to the elevator, her heels clacking against the marble, sharp, cold, desperate. I stood still at the center of the room, not smiling, not crying, just gently resting my hand on my belly, where the baby gave one strong, clear kick, as if it too had felt the weight of its own liberation. I whispered, soft enough for only me to hear, "Mommy protected you." And in the golden silence of that penthouse, I felt a strange calm radiating from the place beneath my hand. Not the silence of pain, but the silence of a woman who knew she had just reclaimed her life in a single night. And I wasn't wrong. Just hours later, as the skies over Paris still glowed a pale lavender at the edge of dawn, Victoria Alcott stepped through immigration at Charles de Gaulle Airport, where 3 AMF financial officers and 2 agents from OCL-CIF were already waiting. They didn't need to shout, didn't need to threaten. One simply raised his hand. "Madame Alcott, you are under arrest on suspicion of cross-border money laundering." Victoria froze, arms instinctively wrapping around her belly to protect the child. But this time, there was no Jameson running to her side. No admiring glances from the world of finance. Only camera flashes sparking through the metal barricades. The image of her in handcuffs spread across financial media in under 30 minutes. Across the ocean, in the dark pre-dawn of Chicago, Jameson Hale entered O'Hare Airport with a baseball cap pulled low, hoping to slip away in the crowd of departing travelers. He had booked a flight to Toronto, thinking he could flee before the SEC closed in. But he didn't know the files had reached the FBI 8 hours earlier. 4 agents in black suits approached, voices calm. "Mr. Hale, please come with us." Jameson turned instinctively, scanning for an escape like a hunted animal, but every exit was blocked. He was handcuffed at Gate 12, in full view of dozens of stunned passengers. And just hours later, the first headline dropped. Skyline Capital stock plummets 38%. Crypto markets shaken like a financial earthquake. One corrupt CFO can bring down a company, but the exposure of a laundering network can bring down an entire industry. And it all began with a 7 months pregnant woman standing in front of a 100-inch screen in her own home. Within 3 days, my phone rang constantly, not out of curiosity, but with gratitude from investors who had nearly lost everything to Jameson's greed and deception. The board of Skyline Capital convened an emergency session and voted to award me $28 million, compensation and recognition for having provided the evidence that saved the fund's entire ecosystem. I received the news while sitting on the sofa, hand on my belly, back resting gently against a cushion, as if something heavy had finally been lifted. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel victorious. I simply let out a long exhale, the breath of someone who had finally escaped a room filled with toxic smoke. That afternoon, headlines spread everywhere. Pregnant wife exposes $42 million laundering scheme. Big papers, small ones, financial, entertainment, broadcast, all calling me names I never imagined I'd be linked to. Whistleblower, reluctant hero, the pregnant woman who cracked a financial ring. But when reporters asked me how I felt, I said just one thing. I did it for my child. By the weekend, I walked into a lawyer's office and signed the divorce papers. I didn't take a cent from Jameson. No assets, no shares, no entitlements. I only wanted freedom. I only wanted peace. I only wanted to rebuild a life on clean ground.